Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're delighted to have so many people here with us this morning. Particularly delighted to have Gordon Snell with us, Joan Binchy, and members of the Binchy family. That gives us great pride here because she belonged to us. She was international, but she lived and loved in Dalkey. So we're particularly pleased that you're here to share all of that with us.
Maeve was like myself. She loved people and loved stories.
Maeve believed everybody had a story. She believed that writing wasn't for the select few. It was for anybody to try, and she would encourage people to try, and she celebrated people's success.
I had the great pleasure of adapting some of her stories. We did it as theatre pieces. Maeve and Gordon came on tour with us throughout Ireland when we did those plays, and people would come up to her afterwards and say, "Oh God, Maeve, that was fantastic, well done," and she would immediately deflect and say, "Oh, it was nothing to do with me, it was all these people, aren't the actors fantastic, isn't everyone else wonderful?" And she really meant that, She was always sharing the success with the rest of us, and we'd have to kind of remind her and say, "Well, you did write it, so it was definitely a lot to do with you as well."
She just seems to be able to write always with so much heart. Even when she's criticising somebody, she's not really. Charles was lovely. Now, he was an idiot, but he was lovely. She's right. She says it better than that.
Having people on stage sharing ideas, encouraging each other is a little microcosm of what is really happening among the writing community, I think. I think people are very supportive of each other, and Maeve was always championing other writers.
What is really nice about this festival is how it brings together all the people that loved Maeve's work. It's become a great fixture in our calendar.
The strength of this festival is the diversity of people that take part.
It's very important for us, I think, to be able to meet people who go through the same thing. Your tribe, it's a tribal thing.
Well, Maeve was a leading light for female journalists, really. I suppose there's still not enough female journalists, particularly in my sphere, which is crime. She sort of was somebody who'd reached the very, very top of her career, but she still remembered to reach back.
She told us also that success wasn't an individual thing, or it wasn't something you took from somebody else if you had it, that it was shared.
In the same way that Maeve Binchy was so generous to do, share your experience, share your knowledge. It's not going to take anything away from your success or your experience, I don't think.
I've worked in the Irish book world for about 40 years, and I'm very proud to be part of it because it's such a collegiate community, particularly for emerging writers.
As a writer, I have felt support and solidarity from the very start of my writing career, and I think it's been so important, and the warmth and generosity that's come from other writers from the publication of my very first book has been kind of unbelievable.
It's certainly, like the name of our panel this morning, like a rising tide lifts all boats. So it's great to see Irish writing getting attention on an international stage.
A lot of people have a story to tell, and they tell it in various ways, and festivals like Echoes can facilitate voices that maybe might not be heard elsewhere.
Just thinking about the theme, Together We Rise, I think you really felt when you're speaking from the stage that people are listening really carefully, and there were lots of smiles and nods and just encouragement from the audience to keep going with that train of thought.
I felt the audience was really warm today, and their spontaneous applause was just very heartfelt and nearly had me in tears. I just wasn't expecting that.
This particular festival is very special because Maeve still has a huge place in this community.
It's lovely to be here. It's my first Echoes Festival, and it's nice because I don't often consider myself a writer, and I suppose people don't consider comedians writers, weirdly, but that's what we are, and that's part of the Maeve Binchy inspiration. She rose us all, we're all writing away as well.
Spirit of generosity, spirit of legacy, spirit of passing things on was something I think Maeve always had in her, but it was accentuated by her teaching, and that spirit went on into all of the amazing work she did with Irish writers while she was alive, and somehow that spirit carries on through this festival, and Gordon, who's the most amazing torchbearer.
Thank you so much, all of you, for coming. I'd just like to say one thing. I actually was born in the Far East, and I lived in Australia during my childhood, and then in London and Leeds. So I was always very envious of people who had a hometown and a home village. But when I met Maeve, and she brought me to Dalkey, I realised that this is my hometown too. I'm very proud to be part of the hometown, and particularly to have been married to Maeve. And I thank Oliver very much for all his marvellous comments. It reminded me actually of the lip reading, which she used to do, and across a restaurant one time, she said, "Do you mind keeping quiet a minute? I'm trying to point you to the far side of the restaurant." She said, "I'm just listening to that couple. I think they're breaking up. And I think they're discussing custody of the dog." But thank you all very much for coming. And I think as a final accolade and round of applause, I'd like to pay a big tribute to Margaret Dunn, who's organised. Thank you, Margaret. None of this would have happened without you. And so I'm so pleased that you inspired this whole festival. Thank you, Margaret, and thank you all for coming.